What about the topic today? I would like to share my experience regarding my previous project where we had to deliver without dedicated QAs, and I was involved as a consultant to define and refine the testing activities for such a team structure. We know that nowadays this type of team structure is getting more and more popular, so I would like to share what we did to have a team that is able to work without QAs in the long run effectively and to have a high quality product at the end of the delivery process. You may ask the question that how this started. It started with a customer request that we had to form a team of engineers, and as said, without QAs. And the initial expectation was that with this new team setup, we should be able to deliver faster, which is the key driver in our story. Besides this, we had to face many challenges that I would like to share. The first one is we are talking about the complex integration, including many third-party components. The next is, unfortunately, the work is ad hoc one, so there are no processes, lack of documentation, and as a consequence, there are many change requests from the customer side that are not handled properly. And if we are talking about the testing itself, unfortunately, we only had end-to-end tests, so we should focus on the lower level ones as well, following the early bug detection principle. And as a problem was that at the beginning is the bugs were detected in the late phase, impacting the timelines as well. Okay, so these are the project challenges. What about the business needs? Of course, we had many from the customer side. The first one is that, as said, which comes from the first point, is that with this new team setup, we should be able to deliver in time, keep the time to market. As part of the expectation management, we know that we should increase the QA awareness, and that's why I'm here, so it shouldn't be a problem. Also, we need to prove that we have highly skilled developers at our company, but we won't skip testing. And the last item is that we need to provide a workflow, or we can call it as a framework, to support our new working habits. So, based on the information that you already have, what do you think? It is just easy as riding a bike, or a little bit harder, as you can see on the screen? You will be able to decide at the end of the presentation, considering your experience as well. So let's see what we're going to cover today. The first is, I started to talk about the initial phase. I would like to share a bit more details with you. Then, as a short detour, I would like to describe the general QA and developers' roles that we should transform a bit in our case. Then comes the magic, the implemented workflow, extended with QA mindset. And as the last point, I would like to share the lessons learned part with you as well. So these are the key topics for today. Where should we start? We know that we have two main areas, as you can see on the screen. The first is the people side. We know that the QA roles are removed from the project, which means that there are no responsibilities, and also there is no knowledge within the team. And as the last point, I think which you experienced as well, there is no motivation to perform the testing activities. What about the other side, if we are talking about the framework? We know that we should provide the process, or we should define, including phases, definition of readies, dones, when and how to sign up the stories. As the second point, it is advised to use checklists, which can help you within the phases, for example. But one thing that I would like to mention is you can have a beautiful process, but if it doesn't work, you won't be nowhere at the end of your day. And as the last point, we need to focus on the QA awareness, as I already mentioned. So I think that's all about the initial phase. Let's see the stereotype section. By the way, how many developers do we have at this conference? Raise your hands. Not so many. Okay. I would like to emphasize that I'm not blaming anyone, so please treat it as it is. And then I will talk about the rest of the audience, including myself as well. So, For example, a story. During a daily stand-up session, developer says, I'm still working on the feature. I need a bit more time, but you don't need to worry because at the end of the iteration, you will be able to test it in 10 minutes, not a huge amount of time. Then, at the end of the iteration, when you found an issue, and you say that this is the problem, you can get the answer like, this is connected to the testing environment, nothing to do with my code. If we are talking about the testing experience, and this is my view on that, the companies, usually we are talking about unit testing experience, so we need to focus on the other test levels as well. When and how to use integration testing, when and how to use mocks, stub implementations, and so on. Now, I'm talking about myself as well. Feature implementation is not my job. I'm not interested in this cross-functional solution. One thing is that about the proactivity. We found a critical issue. We can have a coffee break with the team. Please notify us when we can continue the work. If we are talking about the approaches, I would like to mention two. Sometimes I think we can get lost in the details, like as a kind of exhausting testing. And on the other hand, we can be a short-term worker, just it is available in the test environment, test it quickly, send the report and go on to the other thing. The good news is that in our case, you can practice both the offensive and both the defensive communication. But please think about this as you can widen your professional knowledge. You can get information about how the requirements gathering works, when and how to release our product into production, how to approve the implemented feature with the customer. So you will get benefits in the long run which will be beneficial for you from your career perspective as well, or it can be. Okay, I think that's all about the stereotypes. Let's move on to the next item, which is the workflow. What are the key drivers in our story? As I already mentioned, that we need to reach a common understanding among the team members. We know that we should address the QA responsibilities. That's clear. And to support these, we need to introduce clear definition of dance for the team. I would like to describe the workflow, and then I will go into the details highlighting the QA parts. So it starts with the grooming session where we are talking about the requirements. I think you are familiar with that. The next is the estimation session, and only stories from the grooming. That is one rule. Then we can talk about the iteration scope itself, considering only the stories that are coming from the previous ones. These three can be called as the planning phase. Then it is followed by the general testing activities, development activities, planning, and so on. And in our case, it was extended with an additional exploratory testing item. If everything goes well, we can sign off the stories and we can start the preparation for the release. And I will share what is the trick here. I think, general, one more note here is that I think I can say that the first part is mainly about the development, and the second part is about the bug fixes and testing. We may call this as a finding bugs approach, which is not bad, but we would like to tweak it a bit to have the preventing bugs approach and to have joint efforts. The main question is that how can we do this, and where is the magic formula? The magic formula is introduce QA definition of dance for all stages of the workflow that should be followed by every team member. Let's take a simple example. I don't know if you can see it from the back, but I will describe it. So here you can see a requirement which is about a registration form. As you can see, it contains the major attributes, component, status, story points. By the way, in our case, we use Fibonacci numbers for complexity and estimations. It has acceptance criteria, title, and so on. But from QA perspective, what can be the problem with that? So if you look at this from QA perspective, what about the supported browsers if we are talking about the registration form? What about the required or mandatory fields? What about the validation rules? And so on and so on. So we need to have a checklist that can support us as part of the grooming session, and that we should use in that part of the process. Other than that, I would like to share the key things regarding the grooming session. First is, please try to follow the INVEST approach, which stands for the independent, negotiable, variable, estimable, small and testable stories. As we did for this previous example, please try to use some checklist. In our case, what we did is it was a project running for years. So based on the domain knowledge of the guys and also my quality background, we created a document that was reviewed by the team on a monthly basis, and also it was extended as well, and that we used as part of the requirements gathering. As you could see from the example, we also used a template, but it should contain the values where the checklist can help us. And one more thing from QA's perspective is that please include the test cases on the story level as well, making sure that we will cover the story from testing perspective too. Okay, what about the estimation session? General rule, take testing into consideration, that's for sure. One example, like for example, there is a database change which requires only 5 minutes from the development side, but as impact, you need to execute all the test execution package. So in this case, from estimation perspective, it definitely won't be one story point. Please consider a maximum limit when we are talking about stories. Like in our case, stories above 21 points should be split into smaller ones, because in that way, you won't be able to deliver in time. And one more thing that I would like to mention as the last point here on the slide is to please use baseline stories. Like what we did is that we had reference stories for large, medium, and small ones as well, which can help the team members, the less experienced one, or in case of onboarding a new team member as well. Okay, I would like to highlight the test planning and test execution part a bit. We already had a topic regarding the traceability, which I would like to mention also here on this slide as well. So if you are talking about the tests, please use major attributes like IDs, priority, groups, and so on. That is trivial. The one thing that we used is that in our test management system, we had an automatic rule which helped us to include all the P1 and P2 items into the regression test package, which was not a manual effort. And as we did for the stories, please use some checklist as well, and to try to use test design techniques in practice. What benefits you can have? Usually I can ask the questions when we are talking about the QA part is, guys, do you have information about the current status? What are the open key bugs in the system? How much effort is needed to fix those items? And sometimes I can get answers, I don't know, I need to check the releases, not so good. But if you have, and if you are using good attributes on story requirements level, then you will be able to have proper information. And in case of time constraints and other things, you can focus your testing activities for the most problematic areas. Okay, what I would like to mention here is the exploratory testing. So we know that this is an independent testing activity, that's for sure. In our case, we used this as a specified activity which was about 2 hours per iteration, where everyone should be included, including the business owner as well. You can learn from each other, you can extend your knowledge, and you will have backups in your team, which can be a problem in case of small teams. And one more thing is, please try to focus on the edge cases instead of the execution of the already defined test cases. Okay, kind of summary. So please try to focus on the main rules. Other thing, as I already mentioned, please have exit criteria for the release. In our case, only P4 issues were allowed, and above that, all the P1 and so on had to be fixed before we went into production. Use some kind of QA dashboards, which means one-time configuration. In our test management system, we did that, which can help you to monitor the status, to identify bottlenecks, like you can have information about how many priority items are available, who are the responsible parties, like we were working with multi-locational teams, and so on. And as the last item, as you can see, please try to use key performance indicators. I would like to mention two standard ones, but from a different perspective. The first is velocity. We know that it is used to measure the progress of the team. What can be the problem with that? Usually it happens that unfinished stories are considered as part of calculation. Like, it is developed but not QA tested, but we can do in the next iteration, 30 minutes. No, it doesn't work. One more thing is that, do you track your accuracy? I mean, what was the planned and what was the delivered side? If not, why? If yes, what can you have from that? Like, you can identify the unforeseen challenges. Like, the team had to provide a support for the customer that was not planned. Totally acceptable. Other thing, you can improve your estimation process in the long run. You will see what was the problem and what was working well. So this is all about the velocity. The other thing is that if we are talking about the testing, we use the found issues as kind of labeling, and we identified three main categories. The first one is issues found by the delivery team. The next is issues found by the customer as part of the UAT process. And the last is issues coming from the production environment. To be honest, the number may increase in the beginning of the process or transition. That happened in our case as well. But then the trend should turn around. You may ask the question that, okay, what about my role or the support? Our story was about 3 months, and this was a kind of pilot project, but the plan is to have same projects within the account. How did we do this? In the first month, I was sitting with the team as a kind of active team member, and I was working actively. In the second month, I was participating when we are talking about the key meetings, and I was supervising the main activities. And in the third month, I was only available when it was requested. Okay, so this is all about the consultancy. I think we have reached the last point, which is the lessons learned part. Due to the time constraints, I had no time to dig into the details if you are talking about the test strategy, but I'm happy to answer any questions after the presentation. But it's really important that I would like to mention. That's why it is on the slide. You see that it is not a one-day transition, but worth the investment. For QA awareness, we use the ASTQB materials, which is a really good reference. Let's call this in this way. And we had two, if I remember well, yeah, 2 sessions on a monthly basis for increasing the QA awareness. And about my role, so you need to be, or you have to be proactive if you are working with the team, but also you have to be proactive with the customer or the management team as well to manage the expectations. What about the achievements? The first point is that we were able to decrease the number of issues significantly, and this is based on the last 6 months. I think I can say that this is a working, transparent process followed by not just the team, but also the management as well. Sometimes it was really hard to manage the expectations. We had some conflicts as well in briquettes. But then we were able to manage. As you can see, it provides clear traceability if you are talking about the phases. And I think I can say that we were able to achieve a satisfied team, including the management part as well. So that's all about my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, it looks like we have one question. And let's actually level up, just to refer to the previous one as well. Who has asked a question? Right here in the front. I'll come down to you.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. I wanted to say that. It was part of my speech.
Then please go ahead and tell us whether it can be applied on a greenfield project.
Sorry. Yes, so I don't recommend this kind of approach for greenfield projects. I think it can be used for projects that are running for years. And I think it is not recommended for safety critical items or products as well, where we need to have heavy QA processes and heavy QA part as well.